Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. Some of you have mentioned that with this tam-tam behind me, I look like Russian Orthodox Saint Davislav. So, hello, my children. Today we are here on the beneficent task of kind of trashing this new recording of Brahms' Third Symphony and Second Serenade, featuring the Budapest Festival Orchestra under Ivan Fischer on Channel Classics. Oh dear, what a shame this is. It's not terrible. Let's be honest. I don't want to trash it because it doesn't deserve to be trashed. It's not terrible. I like Fischer. I like this orchestra. I like this label. They get great sound. They get great playing. The strings of this orchestra are gorgeous. They've done fantastic recordings. This is not one of them. And it's very easy to explain why. It's because Fischer has no rhythm. That's the bottom line. I was talking to a colleague of mine about this. He said, friends of mine say Fischer has no rhythm. He's right. He has no rhythm, at least in Brahms' third. The third is the Brahms symphony that everybody screws up. And really, it's a measure of a great Brahms conductor that they get the third right. Most of them don't. And boy, oh boy, I did a whole video on the best Brahms Third Symphonies, and I refer you to that for some tips. But one of the fascinating things about Brahms Third is that it is so rich in basic musical facts that it asks the conductor and the orchestra to do. And you would be amazed at how difficult they find those facts. And I'm going to give you one example. I don't even have to play samples of this. I can just describe it to you, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. You really will. The opening of the symphony, the first few bars, here it is. I made a copy of the first page of the score for you. Take a look. Now, those first three chords, Brahms is very, very careful about them, isn't he? He could mark just Forte and let it go, but he doesn't. He marks Forte under each chord, each one. What does that mean? It means he wants a solid, normal, full forte with no crescendo, no diminuendo, sustained for the full length of each note. You have no idea how hard it is to let an orchestra do that. First of all, the conductors themselves, sometimes they don't even understand what Brahms wants. They really don't. They're supposed to, we know, but you'd be amazed. You'd just be amazed how unaware some of them are of these basic things. But then you have to get your section to play a sustained single forte at one volume for the entire length of the note, not to cut it short, not to make a crescendo, not to anticipate the next note by putting in a pause or a breath, not to make a diminuendo, not to try and sound like you're trying hard only to be forte and not to be fortissimo. It has to be natural. It can't sound inhibited. And I'm only talking about the first three notes of the symphony. But it's so hard to get it right. Now, some conductors just ignore this, like Fortwängler, for example. He makes a huge crescendo. The timpani part is only marked single forte. He makes them come in triple forte. He makes like a cosmic apocalypse out of it. But that was the way he played everything. So, okay, that's his thing. It's the conductor's prerogative. But Fischer here, he seems to want to do what Brahms writes, but he doesn't. First of all, those initial chords, they actually are diminuendo, slightly, just enough to make it sound like they're trying really hard not to be loud. But Brahms wants it loud, or he wants it full. And you should never sound like you're trying not to be something. You shouldn't define the dynamics by what they aren't. It should be what they are. It's a positive thing. And then once the movement takes off, there's something very, very strange about Fischer's approach. It seems to be like he's conducting from a first violin part, because that's just about all you hear. There's no bass line. Look at the bass line there. It's sforzandos going up. You're supposed to have a bass line, and then there's that syncopated rhythm in the middle, which you don't really hear. You don't get the syncopations except in those rare moments where the clouds part in Brahms's orchestration and you can hear through the texture. But that rhythm is going to persist all the way to the second subject for bar after bar after bar. And so there has to be a real sense of interior rhythm to the piece. And none of that is present here. The whole thing just sounds flabby. It's that simple. And what's really interesting about those opening three notes is that the only time that Brahms marks a crescendo is before the coda. And the reason he's saved it for then is to make it extra exciting, obviously, and also because he doesn't have the full brass section playing. It's only the horns, so they have to work harder and get louder. I mean, Brahms is so careful about these things. And it's your job, Mr. Fischer, to do what he wants, and you're not from the very start, and that does not bode well. As it turns out, these central movements are gorgeous. Absolutely beautiful. They call for smaller orchestra, first of all. The second movement is beautifully paced, really perfectly paced, with lovely woodwind playing. And the third movement, you would think is going to be some sort of, schlagfest, a hot, heavy, sweaty, steaming, panting. It's not. It's gentle and elegant. It's so beautifully done. It's as if it sings itself. One of the things Fischer and his orchestra do supremely well as anybody on earth, is those long vocal singing melodies with just the perfect application of vibrato, and it's gorgeous. The cello playing is gorgeous. That makes the first movement all the more frustrating, and the finale is even more frustrating. First of all, it looks promising because it begins swiftly. Most conductors play that finale very slowly, and you really want it to be exciting. It's the most turbulent music that Brahms ever wrote for long, long stretches. So you think, aha, Fischer is going to redeem himself, but he doesn't. He really doesn't. He has no feeling for the music's atmosphere, because right after that opening theme, remember the chorale from the second movement returns. That slow, dark contrabassoon, prowly chorale. Now, Brahms doesn't indicate any change in tempo, and Fischer doesn't give it any change in tempo, but it has to sound dark, it has to sound mysterious or menacing. Here, it's just in tempo. It's absolutely mechanical. It's da da blah blah da 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 blah blah. Part of the problem in Fischer's approach is that he's rushing. He allows the orchestra to rush, even though the basic tempo is quick. And you can hear this particularly. This is always so often the case. Again, it's one of those basic musical issues that so few conductors get right. He rushes the triplets. You can never rush triplets in fast tempos. There's always a tendency to do it. And I know, I've played this piece. I've played in orchestras dozens of times where we have to do that. And the conductors are always saying, wait, don't rush the triplets. Well, if you want to hear an orchestra rush triplets, here they go. Particularly in that second subject, the one that goes dum ba da da dum da 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 dum. Well, at this speed, they're going da 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 dum da 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 dum. It's rushed. When you have a triplet, you always have to hang back, so it sounds like three beats being compressed into two. So it's dum ba da da dum da 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 da. That's the way it's got to go. You have to hear the triplet as a triplet, not as a wannabe eighth note, which is how they sound in this case. It's so distressing. I mean, this is kid stuff, but it really isn't. It really isn't. It requires lots of musicality and smarts in order to do it. And for some reason, Fischer was on autopilot for this finale and for most of this performance, except for those two very, very beautiful inner movements. And it drives me nuts because it should have been great. I mean, that big climax in the finale, based on the chorale, with the brass going crazy and the huge dum bum 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 bum. There's no accent. There's no emphasis. It's just monotonously uniform and quick. And that's what I say. Fischer has no rhythm. I mean, you have to have accents in this music. Brahms doesn't always tell you where they are. He allows you the opportunity to put them in yourself, and you've got to do it. There are just places where the music demands it. Anyway, so unfortunately, this is not a worthy performance of the Third Symphony. And more is the pity, because the Second Serenade is quite lovely, and it's not performed very often. It's unusual to have it. It makes a wonderful coupling to the Third Symphony. This is something a little bit unusual, a little bit special, and it's beautifully played here. And I think one of the reasons maybe is that it doesn't have violins. The piece is only written for lower strings and woodwinds, and so the woodwinds get to shine, and the performance is beautiful and flowing and serene and songful. It's a lovely, lovely piece. It's a a very fine performance of the Second Serenade. I don't have to go into details there. It's lovely. But the reason, of course, that you're going to want to have this disc, is the Third Symphony. And the Third Symphony is a dud. And I am so sorry to tell you that, because if there's any performance I could very easily get behind with pleasure, it's one that comes from this source, because they've done such fine work previously. But I have to call it like it is. And like it is, Russian saints, we don't bullshit. We really don't. I am not saint bullshit. This is the reality of the situation, and I am sorry for it. But there you go. Keep on listening, folks. Better luck next time, Maestro Fischer. Take care.